Hey Jennifer.
Hi, John.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Look at you with your branded background.
Well, I know this it was even more obnoxious earlier. I made the logo smaller and added the full moon because we're getting the eclipse in theory
Yeah.
at tonight. But there are many backgrounds. I have for a long time been using this is a did that yeah, that worked. This is a short film I did.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it was a little animation that didn't actually sufficiently scare me off animation, but thank you
Conveys
for
a lot of emotion that behind you. Something bad is happening.
something bad. Well, it's the standoff between Ducky Banana and
Oh, yeah.
Baron von Thorpe. So
It looks very dangerous.
it got inspired by doing watercolors with my daughter when she was 3, and then only a mere 8 years later it was finished. I don't know how you showed up on my feed
I don't
feed.
know. It seems like I've been seeing, I think we've been liking each other's posts for a little while. I mean, I only showed up on LinkedIn, I don't know, beginning of the year.
Well, yeah. See,
It's mostly when I like went, oh shit, Facebook and Instagram are evil and they
yeah.
are just have destroyed the planet and the world, and maybe I should switch to LinkedIn and also not having a job, I thought,
Well,
oh, yeah,
no,
try
I
this.
mean, this is the thing I find. I'm on LinkedIn because I don't have a job or not enough of a job, and but it's social media. Like it's the exact same sort of rabbit hole with a slightly different flavor. I mean,
Yeah, I kind
it
of like the flavor. And I like communicating with people who are in my kind of work
well,
too.
and this is what I reacted to with your post because I think it was the one about types of like essentially types of B-roll.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and I was just reading your blog. Well, maybe you could I mean I don't know if you want to kind of resume that post. You're thinking on that one.
On the types of footage.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I've been like playing around with that for a while, and I did a talk for Astoria Film Festival Media Labs for a bunch of young filmmakers, and I kind of developed it more there. But it's come, I think it comes out of editing, and I know that you have this same, you know, maybe you haven't articulated it quite the same way, but you have that same awareness of how there's kind of different categories of footage that we use, and we use them in different ways. The first category is being really strictly B-roll, which, classic, you tell what your character to just walk down the street and you film them. I mean, what documentary doesn't have that shot?
Yeah.
But other kinds of things, just, whether it's, landscapes or your character just, making themselves a cup of coffee, or it's the kind of thing that doesn't have any real meaning inherent in it, at least as far as how you'll eventually use it. And that's B-roll. Is like
Mhm.
you will use this somehow. You're shooting it because you know that you'll need transitions, or you'll need to make, cover some idea that the B-roll will only in retrospect you'll realize, oh, this B-roll has a lot of inherent meaning that can go with this idea I want to talk about.
Mhm.
So it can be, it's really flexible. You can use it anywhere. And that's kind of one category of footage. Um, and then the other end of the spectrum is stuff where there's is like verite stuff where there's really something happening, and it would be happening if you were whether you were there or not. You didn't set it up. It's like, or in theory you didn't set it up. Sometimes you fake it, pretend like you didn't set it up.
Yeah.
But in theory this thing is happening, and that's going to be your scene, and it's going to be the content of your scene. You kind of know what it's going to say when you look at it. You're like, this scene is about, and you're going to cut a scene that's about this. So it's like verite and B-roll at the end of the two ends of the spectrum. And there's all this sort of middle ground. And the one that I call the middle place is is what I call process footage. So it's like the stuff where you shoot your character, throwing something on the wheel with clay, and then going through the process of, drawing it and putting it in the kiln. And that's and this is it's going to be cut as a sequence, a process, something's happening, but it's pretty flexible, kind of like B-roll. Like you could put you get the process started where they say, okay, so now I'm going to make this pot on my wheel. And then they're going to talk maybe about something else. It's going to lead to a bigger idea. So while they're doing this process and you've set your audience up to understand it, now they go, oh, we're going to watch them, do this thing. And then they're going to talk about something else, like they're going to talk about, what art can do for you when you're struggling with other things. And, they're going to talk sort of bigger ideas that you're going to use the process footage to go over it. So it's like three categories of flexibility, whereas where, B-roll is super flexible. Verite is not flexible in the same way. And then that middle thing is flexible in that, it's going to have a process, but it's going to have some other idea pinned to it. So that was mine.
Well, that's great. And I mean, I guess what I loved is that you spelled it out. Because it's sort of something, and I was just reading your blog post about radio edits, which I personally hate. Like, I think if you're doing a radio edit, it's because you're in a sausage factory. And I mean, not always. I mean,
and some things are right for radio edit. Some things are really right. I can't even. I can think of twice when I was asked to do that.
that process,
Yeah, where I'm just handed a script and
right?
and then we'll cover everything later.
Because I suppose what I like about your sort of gradation of B-roll is, to me, the best, and I think you have a post in there about layering. Maybe it's the same post. When the process or the verite actually throws to the interview, so it's seamless. Um, versus when you are just covering jump cuts. Um, and I mean, jump cuts is a thing I find interesting too, because the style has changed and now jump cuts are perfectly acceptable.
Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
We don't have to worry about jump cuts as much anymore. It's like jump cuts show, in a way, they show authenticity.
Well, and that's interesting too, because I used to think jump cuts were lazy, but now, because everything's so easy to fake. And that was, I mean, I'm curious what your feeling is on recreations. Do you like them? What do you have an opinion? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And recreations fall on a spectrum too, right? I mean, there's recreations that are like super abstract. What did I watch last night? I watched Tell Them That You Love Me, which is about um, um, autistic facilitated communication in this one case where somebody abused a person. And they did recreations, but they were super like light moving in ways, somebody lifts up a coffee cup and the light hits it, or the classic one. There was a lot of people walking down halls too. But just the back view of her walking down the hall. But there were also, especially in the beginning, some real abstractions of where they used a lot of lighting and they used a lot of, but mostly I'm jumping around here, but mostly in recreations, what you want to do is sort of withdraw content so that they're not so in your face.
Okay.
Right? So you want the abstraction, you want the soft focus or the really deep focus, and you want the cut off images, where you only see like a side of somebody's head, or you only see like hands, so that it's very abstracted so you can use it more generally. That's sort of one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is when it's like you get actors and they're acting out a scene and they're probably not talking, because I've rarely worked with recreations where people are talking, but they're being in the scene. You've got like a they did one recreation where the two main characters met, and she was a teacher, and so they had a classroom and they had the person standing in for her, and then he came down the steps, but it was shot very wide. It was a very wide shot. So I mean, they're I mean, you almost can't make a documentary without a recreation in some form. You're going to go and shoot some stuff that's going to stand for stuff that happened.
Right. Yeah, I suppose though, as sort of as you're saying earlier, it could be like B-roll or sort of beauty. It could be evocative. It's not necessarily narrated. It's not necessarily narrating
Yeah.
or recreating the narrative.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Like if you've got somebody who's the story is that they're, isolated and alone in their house and they're afraid to go outside, you might get an actor to move around inside the house and your camera's out the window and it's light inside and the light's spilling out and it's dark and so it's very voyeuristic and it's just and they're moving back and forth in front of the window in this way that's kind of beautifully abstract and that
Mhm.
will represent for
Yeah.
you for in a bunch of places.
It's
Is
not,
that recreation? Yeah.
yeah. But I suppose it's not literally the story that's being told. You're evoking a mood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so so here's a question I'm trying to formulate. I've seen a lot of PowerPoints recently, and what PowerPoints bring very much, and I think it's similar to film. And where I'm going with this is I've also been dabbling in immersive, like virtual reality types of environments. And one of the people doing educational material in immersive environments was saying, you don't want to just recreate what you can do in a film in these environments. You want to use so that there is something about the medium, like with film, where we can do juxtapositions um, that is different than um, if we're just telling a story with words. What are the elements of storytelling that are kind of specific to film?
It's moving in time. So it's communicating it's there you can do in film, you can have moments where there's not words
Mhm.
giving their own meaning of language, but you're communicating metaphorically and emotionally and with music and sound and images. And you know, it, it, if it was just images and they weren't moving, that would be a painting, or a photograph, but they're moving through time. So you're taking the viewer on this journey through time. You're like, you're occupying their mind every second. Whereas a still image, you give them the still image and you let their mind go wherever it wants.
Mhm.
In film, you don't really do that. You like I think of it as holding the viewer's hand and leading them, through time. I don't know. Did not answer your question.
No, I like that because it's the difference. You're setting the pace.
Yeah,
It,
you're setting the pace and you're setting the mood and I always, when I'm watching a documentary or any kind of film, I look at what I'm feeling and thinking, and then I wonder, because I'm an editor, I'm wondering, I'm assuming that they wanted me to think and feel that.
Mhm.
So like if you're watching something that's like a mystery, or true crime or something, you can always assume that anything, whatever you're thinking right now about whether you think this person is guilty or innocent or that's the guy who did it, you have to assume that the filmmaker wants you to think that.
How do you recognize good editing?
I guess maybe the less I'm thinking about it. But I don't know. At least with documentaries, when I'm watching it, I'm always thinking, "Oh, that's cool. I want to remember how to do that," or that that's a good, cool visual effect, and I'm always looking for different ways of treating those. There's two kinds of moments. There's the moments where something is happening visually that's very evocative, and usually not words. And then there's ones where they're really giving you information. They're using words to lead the story. People are saying this person's saying this, narrator's saying, and they're and so those are that's a place of storytelling that I feel super comfortable, is leading the story through the story beats and how we're going to unfold this story and how we're going to give out the information that we want to give to people, or how we're going to give out the feeling stuff that we want to give to people. And then there's interspersed with moments where it's really just feeling.
I would agree that you can notice when you oftentimes if you notice the cutting, it's because you don't like it, as you're saying.
Yeah.
Um, but um, but I suppose also like I had this experience where a kind of a more experienced editor started. I felt he was taking over from me at this one company. Like I stopped getting jobs there and he started getting jobs there. And then I finally saw some of his stuff and I was like, oh, you're really good. And it was like um the rhythm, like
Mm,
so you could feel a nice rhythm,
mhm.
but also shot flow. And like shot flow
Yeah.
when it's very um well, maybe I should just ask you like, so what what are you looking for in when you're sequencing your shots? Like, did you ever want to be a director? Um, it's whole authorship thing, like, because I think from what I've seen and read of yours, we've both ended up editing documentaries where we get to be the writer,
Mm.
and or they need us to be the writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Super fun.
oh, it was something you'd said or written about collaboration. And the like, if you want to sit there and tell me what to click, it's not going to work. But if you want to
Mhm.
either,
Yeah.
and again, the gradient of collaboration.
Yeah, yeah. And I said before there were a couple of times that I worked with someone who really just they wanted to do the whole cut on paper first,
Hmm.
which I don't know how somebody does that. That seems impossible to me.
Hmm.
Um, but um, um, but this project, it was a few years ago, and and he did. But he had a whole script, and I just was supposed to put the script together. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the first my first pass, I made a lot of changes. I cut
Right.
way down. I changed the order. I added moments of, um, and they said just do the script.
You're right.
It's like, okay. And I mean, it was I knew it was at the beginning of this incredible downturn of work. So I was just happy to have a job. And it's like, and it was so it requires so little of me to do that. I mean, I
Interesting. Yeah.
can, I mean, I'm fast. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
could do that. I was always way ahead of him. He'd go, wait, I need a couple of days. And I'm like, okay.
Right.
You're paying me though.
Yeah.
And and I could do it left me a lot of brain space for my own projects, which I have my own things I'm working on, and that freed me up. I mean, not so much time, but freed me up mentally because I didn't really have to do anything.
Right.
So I'm always surprised. I was surprised, but and I think that I mean, it turned out fine. It was a fine show, but it seemed a little bit um, like a lecture.
Yeah. Oh, the result? Yeah.
Yeah, the result. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think you'd written something about that in the stuff about radio edits as well, like where,
Changes the feel of the piece, the final
yeah,
piece, that because it's not as, it's not following the emotion as much.
yeah. I mean, I find it a great challenge to be handed a script and expected just to execute it because so what kind of projects are you working on? Your biograph stuff?
Yeah, I have this thing that I see as intimately related, but not many other people do.
Hmm.
Because it's really it's a tool um for mental health, really. So it's what I see as visual storytelling. It's a way for people to externalize complex emotions and issues going on in their life that they're doing a lot of ruminating about, and this is a way to bring it out and get distance from it so you can see it in a way, so you become sort of the audience for this little um, uh, movie that you've made, the visual story that you've made. And so it involves, you're using cubes to stand for things in your life that's part of this story, and then moving them around in ways that, so
And
I spend a lot of time working on that when I'm not editing.
okay. And when you say work on that, is it like promoting it or writing about it or so or just
No,
you?
Now I'm writing a book. Um,
You are writing a book on it?
yeah, I just thought, well, as long as I have this free time, maybe I'll start writing a book to,
Yeah.
because it's weird and complicated and nobody knows what, um, it's just, it's unique. It's kind of like art therapy, but but it's much tidier,
Mhm.
uh, and it is something that people can do on their own, and it is the bar for it being beautiful is very low. Like art, like painting can intimidate people. Painting is a great way to express your emotions, but a lot of people don't feel like they can paint. This is like they're they're not going to be beautiful. They're just going to express something. And they
Mhm.
use a lot of metaphor, which I think, so your question earlier about what I'm looking for in shot selection brings us around back to metaphor, which is the thing I'm doing. It's called biographs, and the thing I'm doing with that is about spatial metaphors. Things are higher than others, things surround other things
Mhm.
support other things. The way you arrange the cubes uses those spatial metaphors that are part of our language so much. Like there's it's metaphor is so embedded in our language. I mean, embedded is a metaphor. you know,
Mhm.
that we don't even know we don't know that we're using them all the time because they're just such a part of that. Um, so in shots, I'm looking for things that can be metaphors that add that so that because those kinds of the metaphors we see in our footage add meaning to so there should always be when you cut to B-roll, it should always have some metaphorical relationship to what you're trying to express.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if, and I'm making them up in my head all the time, this coffee cup is an open vessel that he's pouring his heart into, and that's why I'm using that's why I'm using the footage of him, making coffee. I mean,
Yeah. No,
and I've got some story. I've always got some story, and
yeah.
people, why'd you use that shot? So if the director says, "Do we need to use that shot? Can we use it?" And I'm like, "Well, because it means this," and he's like, "You're overthinking this," but
Yeah.
no, that's what we're doing as
That's what
editors.
you're paying me for. Yeah.
Yeah, we're picking the metaphorical meaning of all the images that we're using. Every single one should have a metaphor.
Yeah, well, I absolutely agree. And I think that was sort of where I was driving with the difference between kind of like PowerPoint speech movies and I mean down the road immersive because so often it's kind of like when someone says something and they show it. It's a bit like when you're saying about the recreation. If someone's just showing you the literal thing,
Mhm.
there's no added metaphor.
Yeah, yeah,
You're
yeah,
just showing and telling.
yeah,
Um, Whereas if
yeah.
you're saying one thing, yeah, like where someone's talking about their taxes and you're walking through a cemetery, it's like, oh, they've just lost their spouse, something like that. Like, oh, I had to file my taxes. Um, yeah, no, I like that very much, and I've been trying to loop back to, like I said, I've seen a bunch of PowerPoint recently where people say the words and the words are on the slide, and I'm like, you're doing nothing there. Whereas one time I saw one and the guy was talking about real simple syndication, RSS, which used to be some internet thing to follow blogs before it was easy. And it was a little yellow symbol. And so he put up a shot of Wizard of Oz, and it was the yellow brick road. So he
Mhm.
was saying the words describing the thing,
Uh-huh,
but I remember it, this is 20 years later, because he juxtaposed. Like
uh-huh,
he
uh-huh.
used words for what words are good for, and then he used visuals for what visuals are good for.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And together they make more meaning than either of them has separately. Like they.
yeah, I think one of the things you talked about emergent, um, and I love the notion of emergence where, um, and I had a philosophy of science professor, and it was how like chemistry emerges from physics.
Mm,
There is no temperature in physics, but there's temperature in chemistry.
mm,
And there's no and similarly biology emerges from chemistry and physics and then psychology. So it's these the sum being greater than its parts.
mhm, mhm.
Um, yeah. Was your use of footage, and I think you were using the biographs as an
I did,
example.
yeah, which I thought was a nice, nice
Yeah.
crossover. my two things, because it's a way to show, order and proportion of things. Like if you want to make a biograph about what you care about, uh,
Mm,
and then so you would like list all the things you care about, and each one would get a color, and then you would arrange them to show how uh, these all these things that you care about interact with each other. Do some of them like go together, which you group them together? Are there some that you care about a lot, so you'd use a lot of cubes, or some that you care about very little, so you'd use a little? Are there some that you only care about if this other circumstance happens, so you'd arrange them in ways that communicates more about it? So what I did with those is I said, this kind of movie um, has a lot of B-roll. So each cube, I had three cube colors, and each one stood for those three things: the verite on one extreme, the b-roll in the middle, and the process in the middle. So we had three different colors of cubes. And then you could look at movies and say, this movie is almost all b-roll,
mm,
along with interviews and stuff. Not count. So that triumvirate of footage doesn't include interviews.
mm,
So some things are all interview with b-roll. Um, and other movies are almost all verite.
mm,
But even the movies with verite have a little bit of B-roll, usually to like as connective tissue to transition from one scene to another, and cover some interview, um, and then process. So you could like watch a movie and you could map out with the cubes the part how that movie is structured, in those three kinds of footage, along with the voiceover
mm.
or interviews.
And in your editing process, do you use those cubes, or do you use like post-it notes or
I
index
use
cards?
post-it notes, though. It's very like that, when you when you're structuring a movie, I always have post-it notes that I have up, and I want them on, I want them physical up on a wall, so I can like move
Mm,
them around, and I can stand back and look at them. And that's a lot of where this idea for biographs came from too, is like looking at your story from outside of yourself. What are the parts of this story that I
mm,
have? How do they relate to each other? How do they unfold? And I want to look at it from outside, not have it trapped in my head where it's confusing and complex and hard to get a good look at. Uh,
mm.
so yeah, that visualizing how your story is flowing is, we need to do that, because you
And
can't.
you, in the nitty-gritty, do you color code your footage, like your like interviews on your timelines? Are they one color, and or
No.
no? Yeah.
I don't really. Well, sometimes I'll color code like the like A1 and A2 is always primary dialogue.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
interviews.
Yeah.
A1 and A2, 3 and 4 is other dialogue, or maybe if I need interview on different tracks. So the first 4 tracks will be interview. Then I'll have uh, uh, sync, um, sync sound, and then lower is effects, and then music. And I try to
Mhm.
edit with no more than like 10 tracks.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. So had you read that Walter Murch in the Blink of an Eye book?
Yeah, but years ago, I should go back and read it again.
I'm gonna read it
Uh,
again.
20 years ago, I read it. Still.
One of the things I liked in his thing was he would screen without audio. Like he would just watch it and he would cut. I mean, I guess he was doing mainly primarily fiction, but
Yeah.
because he would read the script and then just cut the
Yeah.
visual.
Yeah. I do that sometimes. Like when I get to around the fine cut stage, I'll watch it with the audio turned off,
Hmm.
and see if I'm getting the story, without any, it should make sense
Hmm.
without, without the sound, without the people talking.
Yeah.
And you definitely see it differently when, without the music. So I'll often wiggle edits when I do that. And
Yeah.
then go back and watch it with audio. And I was like, oh no, with audio I was right.
Yeah. Yeah. I know a thing I suffered from earlier when I was doing essentially I mean, it wasn't really a reality show. It was a like it was sort of a it was a garage show, but documentary style. But we pushed the reality a little bit, but only a little bit. Um, and in that, I had a tendency to squeeze
It's a garage show.
like custom cars, like
Oh yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
but ours was on a Mohawk reserve.
Uh-huh.
So it was culturally interesting because it was these Mohawk um two different garages. It was a show called Res Rides, but what I was building towards was how, because we were half hours, I would squeeze too much in. And because I was the editor, I'd heard it all. So I
Yeah.
knew every line of dialogue, but 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 it's that whole thing about like let it breathe so somebody can laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which took a while to I mean that's a kind of lifelong thing. And
And it is for me too. I think I know that I sometimes cut too fast, and I have to
mhm.
make an effort to go back and
And
slow things down.
a thing and I suspect you're the same way where even my incidental audio, like if someone's talking in the process, I
Hmm.
always wanted it to, it's got to hopefully weave.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you know, it's got to, hopefully it leads like it's a
yeah,
run-on sentence.
yeah.
And you certainly don't want to conflict.
Yeah, all that stuff. I like. I try to make if I've got like an interview, somebody's talking in voiceover over a scene, like one of these process scenes, and then they're talking about how they how they feel about this thing or why they do this thing, big picture stuff. But I want to hear like little bits of audio pop up through the little every little pause in there, so that makes this rich layered thing, and those things are always bringing more. They're anchoring people to the process so
Mhm.
that they're, and I think it makes the whole scene much more interesting and more complex, because you've got this one layer of meaning that's up here that's kind of higher level of meaning, and then you've got this lower level of meaning of what's happening in the process, and you're sort of tracking two storylines.
Mhm.
So I think that keeps people engaged to have that. um, you're tracking two or three kind of storylines uh, in the narrative. So I do have a potential job I'm excited about. Then this is the longest I have been out of work, like since October. I've been out of work. It's really it's never happened to this degree. So we're in a weird time in both the film industry and the world.
I mean, thank you for your time. This has been great.
Yeah, I
Um,
enjoyed talking to you, John.
I'm I am curious where I have this suspicion that generative AI is going to really flood the market.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And I keep making the joke I don't want to be the last saddle maker on the plateau because I've done a lot of corporate videos essentially for foundations that I think would be happy just to type a prompt into a thing and get a generated video.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a bit where I'm kind of exploring stuff like this, which is more on the like,
Well, and I think that this is great because I think there's definitely room for this. There's a lot of things on YouTube and other platforms about, the technique of editing, how to, and when whatever plugins are good, or tips and tricks, or how to, organize your footage, and but I think that there's a lot of room for sort of this like philosophy of editing,
yeah.
like how do you take 130 hours of footage and turn it into an hour?
Well, and just what is a metaphor?
What is storytelling? How do we use metaphor in this? What is meaning in? And I mean, there's so many interesting things to talk about the craft of editing from
Yeah. Well, and we didn't even really get to the why of it because I think a thing I love about documentary is usually there's a very strong why, like
yeah,
why these stories matter,
yeah.
versus just showing. Like, I mean, it's fun to watch stuff. I mean, YouTube's proven that we can watch anything.
Mm,
But yeah,
yeah.
so this has been great, and thank you very
We
much.
want
And
if
I'll
you want to have a follow-up conversation in the future for your next episode, I'd be happy to talk to you again. It was really fun.
okay. Well, thanks very much. Take
Okay.
care.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, John.
Bye.
No, I am the walrus.
Quelle horreur.